Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live radio show of It's a Shore Thing, hosted by your host, Trevor Shore. We have a very special episode today, as I have a very special guest, the former Senior Vice President of Major League Operations for the Colorado Rockies, Bill Geivett. Bill, thank you for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Trevor, great to be here. It's my honor. Are you kidding me? Get this. I've been trying to get on this show for a long time. Thanks for getting me on.
Yeah, well, I'm glad our assistants could narrow a time down and get it going.
All right, let's go.
So I have a lot of questions for you today, but something that I think I want to know, and I think the audience wants to know too, is just kind of your background a little bit. I know you played a little Major League Baseball before you got into the managerial side of things. So I think I would just love to hear a little bit about your upbringing and your background.
And so the whole time I was in high school and played in junior college and then went down to UC Santa Barbara, I always thought about coaching and was really studying baseball. So that plays into something I think I'll talk about a little bit later, but I think everybody always knew me as like the baseball rat kind of guy, always around baseball, always playing in winter league. Didn't play any other sports, just except for karate, just because my parents wanted me to focus on one, and I enjoyed baseball so much. So that's all I really played going through. And then after I played at Santa Barbara, I ended up signing with the Angels. It was actually the fourth time I was drafted, but I really wanted to graduate. And so in A-ball and double-A, and they put a screw in my shoulder to hold that joint together. And then I had a broken hand. And then I finally blew out my knee actually in double-A. So I didn't play in the big leagues, but in double-A, I blew out my knee. And at that time, in caveman days, they didn't just scope you and you went right back and played like they do now. It was a major surgery, and they had to redo my knee, and I would have to play and leading off. So I retired at that point and started coaching in college at Loyola Marymount. I was fortunate enough to get a job there, and then moved on over to Long Beach State. We actually went to the College World Series in '91. And then from there, the New York Yankees came and offered me an area scout and player development coaching job, which I took, and worked for them for 3.5 years. And then the Montreal Expos called and asked if I'd be their farm director, which I did. And then pretty much in the front office from then on out. Went over, they were starting up Tampa Bay. And so they got me to go over there to help start the club. And then the Dodgers called, and I went over there and was assistant GM with the Dodgers. And didn't like it and ended up leaving and went over to the Rockies as director of player personnel, and then finally senior vice president of Major League Operations, which I basically made all the final decisions for our Major League club at that point.
Okay, and do you want to expand on being the former senior vice president of Major League Operations? Was it similar to a job of being a GM? You said you had final say, so nothing happened without your final vote of confidence.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, what happened was instead of being in scouting and player development like I switched over to being with the Major League club on a day-to-day basis. So worked with the manager, and as far as roster moves and anything we were doing, I was the final say on basically what we would do. So, it was definitely different in that, my total focus was there as opposed to being in the minor leagues, which I really liked a lot. And I had done for the majority of my career. But at the same time, it was interesting being at the major league level on a day-to-day basis, which I had never done. I'd been with major league clubs and I'd have duties at the major league level. And before then I was assistant GM. So I would spend a lot of time with the major league team, but on a day-to-day, being able to be there every game, home and road with the team, traveling with the team, all that, gives you a better sense of what the players go through in terms of a long season and dealing with the season, because it is a marathon. That's for sure. That's where people don't understand last year in the 60 game thing and trying to act like that's a real season. That's not. So I don't take anything away from the Dodgers winning the championship, but at the same time, that's not the regular fight of a full season. And you've seen some clubs falter down the stretch. And that full season, that full major league season really tests your depth. And it tests your talent first, but then your depth, because you end up having so many injuries and so many roster moves. So the leadership as the manager to handle all those changes is really important. And the staff's ability to, I'd say, overcome all the adversity that comes in 162 games, and then to be in a pennant fight and all that stuff leading into the playoffs. It's really, really, it's different. It's a lot different. The schedule is, you got to be able to handle the schedule depth-wise when you're building a roster. And that's something that wasn't really tested last year.
And at what point in the 162 game season do you feel that the players kind of get exhausted? It just becomes a total slog? Because I mean, 162 games is a lot, as you touched on. What part of the season do you think it kind of separates the men from the boys, would you say?
I would say if you're, I mean, a loss in April is the same as a loss in September, right? But for whatever reason, you tend not to care as much in April and May because you're just getting going. Everybody says you just want to be around 500 in June. But when you start getting in July and August and the meat of the summer, after the All-Star break, maybe the next month of that, and you're in, well into July and beginning of August, you really you've got to know that you have a chance. And I think that's the part, probably in June. June is where you figure out if you're, a contender or pretender. You really got to start making your run before that All-Star break to at least be in contention in one of the top 2 or 3 teams, and not any more than, 7, 8 games out at that point. And I think that's where you figure it out. And your players kind of figure it out too, because, when you start going in the season, and everybody can start out strong, you see it all the time where they'll start out strong in April and May, and they may end up in last place by the time the thing's said and done. But if you're going to be around towards the end, you typically see the club start playing well in June, beginning of July, and then you have a shot. And then the trading deadline's the end of July. So you really have to kind of plan on what you might need for the playoffs or start to sell. That's whatever your posture is at that point. Either you're selling or you're buying, or you're just holding pat for next year.
Yeah, so that was my next question, actually. So when you were kind of running things for the Rockies, were you in a position of the playoffs, or like trying to get guys at the trade deadline, or were you kind of doing a fire sale, or maybe somewhere in between? Because we saw this year the Cubs, I mean, they traded everyone away. They just sold, cleaned house. So were you kind of in the middle of that, on the far side?
In those couple of years, we were kind of in the middle. We were really kind of in the middle. We weren't real active in terms of making a lot of deals. In years prior, we were on both sides of that. So, I mean, I've had experience in both of them, where you're trying to make a deal, you're trying to make a trade to strengthen your club, and also at the same time, you're trying to move some money so that you're not paying the guy. You got to remember now you're dealing with, number crunchers in a finance department and ownership. So if you're not going to be in the playoffs, and you have a player, you only have control of the player until the end of the year, and they're going to be a free agent. Well, if you're paying them $12 million a year, which is in a major league season, you pay for 6 months. So I'm no mathematician or anything, right?
Yeah.
But you can figure out if you save 2 months of paying this guy $4 million, that's a lot of money. So I think that's what you kind of get into. If you can trade a player away for a couple months, then you're saving the club a lot of money, and you don't plan on bringing the player back or controlling them, or maybe you do. You let them go, and maybe you can re-sign them, but you don't need them for the last couple of months because you're not going to be in the playoffs. So you see that a lot in terms of what is truly your direction of next year. I think what a lot of people don't understand, because I think a lot of major league clubs try to disguise it somewhat, but you're really positioning yourself for a window of opportunity to compete in the playoffs. And you know where that is, kind of with who you have coming up, who you have on your major league club. When do all these things converge so that you can be in position to really compete for a division title or to be in the playoffs? So a lot of times that's not publicly talked about. And I'll give you an example. We really thought with the Rockies in 2008 was our year where we're going to be in the playoffs. And then we won 19 out of 20 and ended up in the playoffs and ended all the way to the World Series in 2007. And that came earlier for us because we went on this stretch at the end of September and went crazy and ended up getting there a year before we thought. And then in 08, we had a down year, but 09, we were back in the playoffs. So we knew that there was a window of opportunity there for us to compete, to actually compete in a very strong division. But at the same time, hopefully win a division, could get into the playoffs, do all that in that type of time. And then after that, we were probably going to be in a little bit of a downtime. Those are the types of things that you go through. And I think every fan can actually do that. But when you're a fan, you want to win every year, right? and a lot of times, with like the Cubs are basically saying, hey, look, we're not going to win. And we're not going to win with this group. Let's just get rid of all of them, get as much back as we can, and try to rebuild. And that's the typical response that you should see if you don't have confidence in your group, is that the club should be doing that to get yourself back to where you can compete as soon as possible. Okay.
And then, so my next question kind of leads into that. As you said, the fans want to win every year. Are any of your decisions maybe you're thinking, hey, the fan, this guy's a fan favorite, we want to get rid of him, the fans are going to have our heads. Are you thinking about that stuff, or are you guys just trying to build on the future?
No, I think you better be always be concerned about your fans. They pay the bills. So yeah, you have to be concerned about your fan base. And I think you need to communicate that type of thing well to your fans and what's going on, because I think that's the frustration that the fan feels, is like, what are these people doing? They don't know. And so they have a lot of frustration in what's going on with the club. So I think that's one aspect that clubs really don't do very well, is truly communicate what they think. I think they believe that the true fan is paying attention enough, they can see what's going on, and they don't want to come out and say, hey, we're rebuilding. That's like, for whatever reason, that's like a no-no. They feel like they'll lose whatever season ticket holders they have or whatever else. Why am I paying for season tickets on a rebuilding team that's got no chance to win? Well, majority of teams, you can tell when they're rebuilding. It's not hard to figure out. Anybody thinks that the Cubs weren't, moving a lot of players and kind of repositioning things, I don't know what to tell you. You're not paying very close attention to what's going on. So, those are the things. I just think the clubs need to communicate a little better. And I think that would be helpful to some of them. But at the same time, just know that, part of being a fan is knowing that it's cyclical. you're going to go through times where you win. I mean, especially when you're a club in more of a middle market. And that's what I